In this video, I'm going to talk about the universal law of polarity. Polarity is one of the Hermetic principles and states that everything in this universe has an opposite. This life exists in polar opposites. For example, yin and yang, hot, cold, minus, plus, action, reaction, and so forth. The idea of polarity also can be translated as duality or dichotomy and has been emphasized by ancient philosophers as well as psychologists and scientists. This idea that the universe, life, exists at the same time as a matter and a form, as in essence or potentiality. In spiritual terms, and the term that I often use is the unmanifested, which is our divine essence, and the manifested or physical reality. So the law of polarity states that every experience, every emotion, every idea or situation in life has its opposite. In physical life, polarity shows up as lack of something and abundance of something, whether it's health or money or any kind of situation. So how can we apply the idea of polarity in real life? First and foremost, notice it in your physical well-being. Any kind of illness is the polar opposite of health. Sometimes it may be difficult to identify the polar opposite of a particular situation. For example, if you're frustrated by some issue in life, whether in relationships or with your job or financial state, if you cannot pinpoint its opposite, simply gauge from the point of view of the lack of. If you are facing challenges, for example, if you're not happy with the circumstances at your work, for example, work overload, then you ask yourself, what's the opposite of it? Or what's the lack of the overload? The opposite would be less workload. For example, not enough money is the opposite of a lot of financial inflow, money that comes to you and stays with you. If you're experiencing some kind of negative emotion or are dissatisfied by a circumstance in life, in a particular situation, ask yourself, what's its polar opposite? The polar opposite of dissatisfaction would be joy and satisfaction with what you're doing or what you're facing. So a good tool in this case is shifting focus. So at any given moment, you can shift your focus onto what you want to experience instead and shift your point of attraction. So at any given moment, if you're not satisfied with what you're experiencing, then stop and think what you want to experience instead, whether it's a feeling or situation, and try to shift to that emotional state. Of course, it's easier said than done. Some of us find it easy to shift just by shifting focus, but some of us who are more deeply rooted in emotions may find it difficult to shift to the polar opposite of a more favorable object or situation or emotion. So I recommend using tools of letting go and accepting feelings without resisting, allowing those negative feelings without resistance for a certain period of time, 30 or 60 seconds, and shift from that. So the first tool is to shift your focus from one idea or entity or situation to its polar opposite. Another area that the law of polarity can be applied is in our relationships. We attract who we are, and we attract people who are polar opposites of us. Yes, of course, like attracts like. We attract people who are like us in positive ways, but also all the differences and issues we encounter in relationships are due to the opposites. People who have the opposite qualities from us. In other words, since polar opposites are two of the same states of mind or emotions in polar vibrations and opposites in vibration and degree on the spectrum, this means that we need to shift those negative points of attraction towards more positive ones. For example, the bully and the bullied are polar opposites. They are vibrating at the polar frequencies on the spectrum. A very important point to keep in mind when looking at polarity is that deep down at the core, polarities are one. They come from the same source and they show up in polar opposites on the spectrum. The bully and the bullied are the same core wound, the same identity issue at the personal level that are showing up as polar opposites, because emotional wounds are the same. They are both coming from the wounded self image and not enoughness and low self esteem. But on the vibrational spectrum, they show up as one, the bully, as excessively confident and feeling the need to attack someone, and the bullied person would be someone who is denying the power of his own self. Polarity is rooted in oneness. In relationships, for a large part, the point of attraction at which two people come together is often rooted in such disparities that the two are different, seemingly different, but at the same time, at the core, they have the same wound. This can be clearly seen in narcissistic relationships, where we have one person who is the giver and the narcissist, the taker. Well, again, these two individuals are rooted in the same trauma, which is wounded self, but they show up differently. The giver, the disempowered one in a narcissistic relationship, is in some form a narcissist themselves, because they are denying their own power and they seek their own power by giving, and by giving they receive a sense of self. In the end, the key is balance, to find balance and be in the middle of polarity, because being in the middle is the point of power. This is also called paradox, and paradox is polarity, or vice versa, polarity is paradox. So paradox is the point of power where you're standing between the two polar opposites and you're balanced. Whichever direction you go does not matter for you, because you are okay with either or. This is how you can heal and empower yourself, that any given moment you can balance your frustrations or negative emotions or dissatisfactions with everything in your existing reality. And when you balance yourself, you find yourself in the middle on the spectrum where you are okay with either or, and then you can freely choose what you want to have and what you want to manifest and what you want to feel or experience. So stop and ask yourself, what is in this situation that's making me frustrated now, or that's making me unhappy? And what I want to experience instead, or What does this situation show me the lack of? So then shift to that, or be aware. And simply by awareness, you'll be able to shift, or you'll be able to balance yourself. But more importantly, remember that it's the emotional attachment, it's the emotional engagement with any of the polarities that matters. So once you neutralize your feelings and attachments around a particular unwanted situation, you will automatically lean towards its opposite, more desired vibrational frequency, and its corresponding reality will be manifested. If you want to take this step further, you can practice something called non attachment, ultimate non attachment, where you're not attached to neither the positive nor the opposite. You're not attached to polarities at all. That even the positive experiences to you mean nothing. Yes, you're capable of fully engaging with life, with people, with all the emotional and experiential pleasures life has to offer. But you always remember in the back of your mind that this is only temporary, that this positive experience has its opposite, that is the undesired reality, the undesired experiences, and remind yourself and shift back to that balanced, equanimous state where you are not attached to either of the spectrum, but you are comfortable with what is. And then from there, you can choose to experience whatever you want, and you can manifest whatever you want. Of course, it takes some practice. It definitely is a great tool for personal development. I practice it myself, and personally, the biggest challenge I find with it is remembering. As long as I remember to apply this, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm able to shift any uncomfortable, undesired situation if I'm willing to sit down and take time and meditate and to shift it. But when I'm not remembering it, or I'm caught up and wired up with some kind of worry or life problem, that is when I experience suffering. So I do have reminders that I post on my walls, as well as carry some kind of jewelry or an object that reminds me of it, like my applications. I hope you'll practice this and see how it goes.